Discussions at the UN Climate Change Summit at the end of this month will centre around cutting greenhouse gas emissions, but they'll also touch on adaptation. Lokwei Su reports on how we will need to figure out ways to live and survive on our changing planet.
Changing what we grow and how we grow it. Rethinking how we store, make and transport what we need to keep our economies running. Ramping up our defenses so we can react in time. And when even these are not enough to keep us safe, relocating entire communities so they can start life elsewhere. Just some of the hard choices we have to make to cope with a climate that has changed, that is still changing, and that will continue to change whatever we do or fail to do to mitigate the emission of gases driving this change.
Mitigation is the process of attacking the causes of climate change. You want to reduce your carbon dioxide emissions, you want to reduce deforestation, but mitigation by itself will not stop the worst excesses of climate change from affecting society in general. Therefore, you need adaptation. For climate adaptation, the role is to reduce the impacts and reduce the risks that happen, that are driven from climate change, driven by the excess emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere.
Even if we're successful in cutting our emissions to zero tomorrow, we have baked in impacts for the future. So we'll have bigger storms, more flooding, deeper droughts, greater heat extremes, even if we succeed in our goals. It involves decisions across virtually every sector, every discipline. Mitigation, on the other hand, has a very easy metric for measuring progress. How many gigatons have we kept out of the atmosphere of carbon? When you go back to adaptation, it is everything, and that makes it really hard to measure.
But there is one measure that some might consider the most important. According to the UN's Weather Agency, the number of climate-linked disasters has gone up 5 times in the last 50 years. The economic cost has also shot up a hefty 7-fold. But not so the cost in human lives. Fatalities from extreme weather events have fallen almost 3-fold for the same period. As the head of the WMO puts it, we have got better at adapting to save lives. That's something Bangladesh, ranked 7th in the world's most climate-affected countries, has been forced as a matter of survival to learn.
We are sitting on the delta of 2 of the biggest rivers in the world, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, which are regularly flooding. The other reason is that we have a very low-lying coastal zone, which is susceptible to sea level rise and salinity increase. What we are doing is we have a short-term adaptation strategy to help the people where they are, adapt to the conditions where they are, with a longer-term strategy of helping them plan to move away when they are no longer able to continue where they are.
But the sheer range and time scale of such adaptive measures makes it hard to predict consequences, both intended and unintended.
For instance, solar radiation management, which is one way of geoengineering, hacking the planet to reduce incoming solar radiation. In other words, trying to cool a region by stopping the sun from reaching the surface. The unintended consequence is that very little thought goes into thinking about who maintains the amount of aerosols that are injected into the atmosphere for managing solar radiation. Also, the dependence on these sort of new technologies like geoengineering can often detract from the important need to cut the sources of climate change.
It was this reluctance to detract from the task of mitigation that, in the 1990s, would drive then US Senator and later Vice President Al Gore to dismiss adaptation as a kind of laziness, a sentiment he would retract by the 2010s, admitting he had been wrong not to grasp the moral imperative of acting on both fronts. In the richer and, for now at least, the safer parts of the world, there is still the luxury of debate. For countries like Bangladesh, the time to act was yesterday, just so they can keep their heads above water for today.
Whole world is going to have to adapt, whether they like it or not. Bangladesh is probably the most aware society about climate change, and we are preparing ourselves. And what we do today, the rest of the world is going to have to do tomorrow. There's no escape from this. Climate change is happening. It's going to get worse.